Hi, and welcome to my Facebook Live launch for my book, Songbird. Actually, an introduction because I just got my author copies today, and it is so pretty. Yes, my name's Karen Heenan, and I'm here today to introduce my book to the wider world. It's only moderately terrifying knowing that there are people on the other side of the phone watching me. Anyone who knows me in person knows I'm not a happy camper in front of a camera. And when I started this path to publication, I didn't actually realize I was going to have to come out from behind my computer and face you all. But here I am. We can do hard things. I'm going to spend a little extra time here at the beginning just waffling on about the project, giving people time to get into the live event. Fingers crossed technology works for all of us. Hopefully some of you lovely people have pre-ordered the book, in which case it will arrive at midnight on your e-reader. If you're a traditionalist and have ordered a paper copy, it should be there before you know it. I'm going to say this again at the end, but if you read the book, please leave a review on Amazon or Goodreads, or both. Reviews feed writers. It's what keeps us going. Okay then, Songbird is a historical novel set in the early years of the reign of King Henry VIII. It's not another Henry and the Six Wives book, although Henry and two of the wives do make an appearance. But this book came about from a slightly different place. Years ago, and I won't tell you how long ago because it's embarrassing, I was reading a biography of Henry, and one little tiny fact got stuck in my head and wouldn't leave me alone. You know how a grain of sand in an oyster produces a pearl? This book may not be a pearl, but it's what happened when something got stuck in my brain and wouldn't let go. I'll tell you a little bit more about that fact and how I used it in the book once the reading is done. And speaking of reading, here we go. Starting at the beginning, Chapter 1, December 26, 1516. 2 days before my 10th birthday, my father sold me to the King of England. When my mother shook me awake in the gray December dawn, I was told no more than that we were going on a journey. I wondered why my father would choose to travel in such bitter weather, and my questions only grew as we spent the day on one frozen road after another. The sky was black when we finally arrived at Greenwich, and I was exhausted and near tears. We trudged past the gatehouse through deep drifts of snow. The thin soles of my sister's boots might as well have been paper against the rutted track. By the time we reached our destination, all I could see through swirling flakes was an endless expanse of brick rising to melt into darkness, and more glass windows than I had ever seen. A glow issued from the panes on the ground floor, and higher up, slivers of light escaped tight-closed shutters. The warmth of those windows made the outdoors, layered in shadows, seem barren indeed. A gust of wind slammed into us, and I leaned against my father. It seemed days since Mum had dressed me in my heaviest kirtle and handed us bread and cheese for the journey. I was very hungry. "None of that," he said, his voice gruff. After a long look at the doors, he reached for my hand. "It will be warmer inside." Greenwich Palace was only 5 miles downriver from London, but it was a world away from the mud-choked streets of Southwark and its cramped, squalid houses. I tried to take it all in. Lofty beamed ceilings, vivid tapestries, scented rushes underfoot. At home, the rushes were changed yearly and didn't smell sweet when new, and I had never seen a tapestry. I stored it up to tell Madeline, whose jealousy would know no bounds when she learned what she'd missed. I didn't understand why we'd left her home. "May we stop now?" I was weary of trying to match Da's long stride, but he had me firmly by the hand. "Hush, child." He hauled me along until we encountered someone. My father loosed his hold on me and bowed to the man, who glittered in the wavering light of the torches mounted along the walls. They spoke briefly, and then my father bobbed again and reclaimed my hand. I started to ask where we were bound, saw his expression, and sealed my lips. When he looked like that, there was no reaching him. What fretted him, other than the cold and our distance from home? It could not be those things, since he was the one who caused us to make the journey, and surely he knew it was cold. It was Christmas, after all. We stopped before another set of doors, tall and wonderfully carved, with golden handles worked in the shape of dragons. There was a guard outside. I supposed he was a guard, though he was dressed as splendidly as the last man, wearing a green and white striped velvet tunic that was heavy with embroidery. and he asked what business we had within. I tried to listen to their conversation, but my ears caught the strains of music inside, and I was lost. "Take yourselves in," he said, and swung the door wide. "You'll see him. Whether he will see you, I cannot say." I still knew not whom we were there to see, and I grew even more stupid on entering the chamber. It was immense, far larger than our house, larger than the inn where I delivered Mum's washing, larger even than the church where I dozed and shivered on Sundays. Many times larger, and like the men in the passage, it seemed to shimmer with a light of its own. There were tapestries on every wall, worked with fantastic figures and beasts for which I had no name. Candlelight gleamed off silver and gold plate. "Come along," my father said, prodding me. The chamber was full of people. I noticed them, men and women dressed in colors and fabrics far grander than the men in the corridor. I'd fallen into one of Madeline's tales. People like this did not exist. Something in their grandeur frightened me, and I tried to turn away, but Da towed me forward, and the crowd parted. They were staring, their eyes hard and shiny as the diamonds on their sleeves. I'm certain they wondered, as I did, what we were doing in their midst. They appeared unwilling to come too close, and we continued until my father halted so abruptly that my split soles skidded, and I sat down hard on the floor. Silk rustled as the nearest ladies whisked their skirts away. Embarrassment was new to me, but it was easy to see we were horribly inferior to these people. It seemed best to remain invisible, so I crouched on the floor, watching my father straighten and take a deep, shaky breath. A tug on my hand made me scramble up, and I caught Da's annoyed glance. I hoped that by the time we got home he would forget to tell Mum, and I might avoid a thrashing. My father spoke now, his stumbling words directed upward. I forced my eyes to follow his gaze and nearly folded at the knees again. While my sister told me stories of princes and fair maidens to lull me to sleep, Mum's tales were of another sort. If I misbehaved, she warned, one day a giant would carry me off and eat me bit by bit until there was nothing left but bones to pick his teeth. I examined my conscience for a crime that merited the extremity of such a punishment. The giant was immense, and from his bright hair to the tissue-like fabric that made up his costume, he seemed to be fashioned entirely of gold. My eyes fastened on the chain he wore about his shoulders. It was as thick as my wrist. "What have we here?" The giant's voice was deep, a rumble of summer thunder. "Your Majesty," my father stammered, and launched again into the speech he'd been muttering since daybreak. I thought the giant was unkind to make him repeat it, but perhaps he hadn't understood with all the noise. I'd heard it so often during the journey the words had no meaning. I forced myself to look around as my father spoke. If only Madeline could see these gowns, it would take the glory out of her new sleeves for certes. The thought gave me a mean pleasure, for it was not often her opinion of herself was brought low, and rarer still, I was the one to do it. The ladies' garments were no more splendid than those of the gentlemen. Aside from the golden giant, I saw men in radiant blues and greens, rich figured velvets of crimson and black, and everywhere more of that dazzling gold cloth. So many gems glittered around me, it was as if the heavens had scattered themselves upon the room. I noted a young man nearby, dressed all in tawny velvet, with an intricate trimming of pearls and gold thread on his doublet. On his shoulder-length dark hair he wore a matching cap, which sported a yellow gem big as a bird's egg. His eyes met mine for a moment. Unlike the others, he actually seemed to see me. I began to feel safe, despite my surroundings. Who, after all, would notice a child in a place like this? My mother's instructions were that children, especially female children, should remain silent. I felt no larger than a moth among all these flickering candles. God's teeth, she's filthy. The giant leaned forward in his chair. Jewels flashed and shimmered when he moved. He was a veritable rainbow. Thus spoken to, it seemed I must look at him. For all his size and magnificence, his shining pink face appeared kindly. I gave him a tentative smile, thinking of Mum and the rough scrubbing she had given me at dawn. I wasn't clean enough for the giant. Perhaps he wouldn't want me after all. "So she sings," he said, rising and placing broad hands on his hips. Rings sparkled on nearly every finger. "We would hear her." My father knelt. "He wants you to sing." "Sing?" My heart thumped in my chest. I concentrated on a grease spot on my father's gray hose to keep from shaking. "I'm scared," I whispered, and then dropped to my knees when he clouted my ear in a perfect imitation of Mum. My father's hand rested on my shoulder, and his fingers tightened as my silence persisted. It mattered so much to him that I sing, and I could not. I let the music filter into my consciousness again. It showed the depth of my fear that I had ever lost it. It was wonderful, like a river, bewildering me with torrents of sound. My mouth opened and shut, but my throat produced no sound. It was almost as if I had forgotten how. "Your Grace, may I?" A boy threaded his way through the crowd and offered himself with a bow. "Perhaps she needs a song." The giant considered this, dropping back into his intricately wrought golden chair. "Then play for her, Tom." This boy had the giant's favor. He grinned at me through unshorn hair the color of straw, and began to lightly pluck the strings of his instrument, bringing forth an age-old tune known to everyone. "Look at me," he said under the music. "Don't be feared." With his smile to give me courage, it was easy to mouth the gay lyric and pretend I was singing to him instead of these strange and brilliant people. The minstrels in the gallery ceased their song and took up the air the boy played for me. I cared not for the scrutiny of the shining courtiers now. I didn't even care if they listened. I sang, and the thing inside me that was my voice washed away my fear and made me all but insensible to the jeweled mob standing hushed around me.
The cuckoo, she's a merry bird, she sings as she flies. She brings us glad tidings and tells us no lies. She sucks the white flowers for to keep her voice clear. And when she sings cuckoo, doth the summer draw near. I will rise up and meet him as the evening draws nigh. I will meet him as the evening draws nigh.
My voice spiraled up and out, filling the chamber, stirring the pennons suspended from the gilded ceiling. The song was over. I sought the boy's face. He jerked his head, and I looked up. The giant's expression was stern. I remembered the curtsy my sister taught me and cautiously tried it. He smiled then, by all appearances delighted. I looked from him to my father, wondering why Dal brought me all this way to sing when I was punished nearly every day for wasting time with music. "She shows much promise," he said. "We will have her." He waved a hand at one of the men by his side. "Richard, take this fellow out and give him what he asks." The hand waved again, this time in the boy's direction. "Tom, take the child to Cornish. He'll know what to do with her." "Mayhap a bath, your grace?" Tom said. There were a few snickers. I glared at him, and the laughter grew louder. My father patted my head, picking at my snarled hair in a belated effort to make me presentable. "Goodbye, child. I'll give your love to Mum and Madeline." Until that moment, I hadn't understood that he was leaving without me. I wrenched away from Tom, my mud-covered skirts flying. "No!" Bending swiftly down, he spoke in my ear. "'Tis for the best. Be a good girl and do as they ask." Sobbing, I caught at the hem of his cloak, but Tom peeled my fingers loose. I wiped my tears with one hand, and with the other fetched him a blow similar to the one bestowed by my father only minutes earlier. He yelped and staggered back. I swung again, but this time he was wary, catching my wrists in square brown hands. The chamber came to life, the courtiers' laughter echoing off the walls. I stood quietly, enduring their mirth, watching my father retreat through the crowd. He did not look back. When the doors closed, my shoulders drooped with despair and fatigue. "Now, little one," came that jovial voice so far above me. "Tell us your name." His palm stopped just short of touching my hair. "Bethan," I said, trying hard not to snivel. He was tremendous on his feet. I found myself at eye level with the padded and pearl-encrusted codpiece that jutted out like a bizarre jeweled egg. "That was my lady mother's name." Emotion softened his voice, and I forgave the pearls, though I wondered what sort of man decorated his cod. "Mum never said anything about kindly giants. Perhaps she knew nothing about this variety?" More likely, I thought, she knew and never told. I held tight to Tom's hand. Kind or terrible, I needed to know what was to become of me. "Are you really a giant?" My voice, strained from singing after hours in the cold, was barely audible, but I knew he heard me by the flash in his eyes. His laugh boomed out. With a flick of his hand, he gestured for Tom to raise me up. The boy lifted me under the arms, holding me so we were almost the same height. "I'm not a giant, Elizabeth," he said, and this time he did touch me, laying one finger lightly on my chin. "I'm your king." And there we are. Partway through chapter 1, Bess being brought to the court by her father to sing for the king. At this point, she knows she's been sold, but she doesn't really know what that means, or that she could spend the rest of her life in the court of the king. I promised I would say more about the fact that inspired Songbird, but I can't say much without spoilers, only that Henry VIII was such a music lover, he did buy a child at least once, but that child is another character in the story, not Bess. I wanted to explore what it would feel like to know you were sold, even if it benefited you, and how you saw yourself and your family going forward, and what struggles you might have finding your place in the world when your own family didn't want you. If you want to know more, you can stay up a few more hours and crack that pre-ordered book, and hey, tonight you even get an extra hour to read it. If you haven't ordered yet, you can find it on Amazon. I'm pretty sure I put an order link on my Facebook page. Pretty sure. In several places. For those of you who joined late, I mentioned this at the beginning, but it is well worth mentioning again. Reviews help other readers learn what they want to read next, and it teaches Amazon that we're worth promoting. Leave a review on Amazon, leave a review on Goodreads, either or, both is best. And I just want to say one more thing. Publishing is a whole different world than it was even when I started out writing in the days before the internet. I'm sure some things were the same, but nowadays it definitely takes a village to make a book. Thank you all for being part of my village. I hope you enjoy Songbird. Bye.